Loreen Myles thought she knew her son, Thane, a quiet, intelligent 14-year-old who preferred sketchbooks over socializing. But when 6 children vanished and a 7th was found barely alive, the horrifying truth surfaced. The monster everyone was searching for was sleeping just down the hall. **** In the quiet suburb of Red Hollow, life moved slowly. The streets were lined with trimmed hedges, mailboxes leaned slightly from years of use, and neighbors waved politely but rarely visited one another's homes. It was the kind of town where everyone assumed they were safe. Loreen Myles had moved there 10 years ago after a bitter divorce, hoping for a fresh start for herself and her only child, Thane. At 38, Loreen worked nights as a nurse at the local hospital, often leaving Thane alone from late evening until sunrise. She believed he was old enough to handle himself, especially after being homeschooled for the past 2 years. Thane had been withdrawn ever since an incident at his middle school, when he attacked another student during lunch with a broken pen. The school described it as a misunderstanding, but Loreen remembered the calm expression on his face when he was suspended. She chose to believe what the school counselor said, that Thane was simply gifted, misunderstood, and needed more structured. Learning at home despite his cold demeanor and lack of friends, Loreen always thought her son was special. He didn't cry easily, never threw tantrums, and was always organized. Too organized, maybe. His room was obsessively neat. His books were aligned by height, his pencils by shade. He kept notebooks filled with lists, codes, and drawings that looked too complex for his age. But Loreen never pried too much. She told herself he was just intelligent and creative. When small things went wrong, she didn't connect them. Like the time she found a pile of feathers and bones behind the shed. Or when the neighbor's cat went missing and Thane didn't seem surprised. There was also the night she woke up to find him standing at the foot of her bed, just staring. He said he had a nightmare. She told herself it was normal for a boy who had been through so much change. Red Hollow had always been considered one of the safest places in the region. The local police had more traffic violations than crimes. That's why the town was shaken when 5 decomposed bodies were discovered in the dense woods just beyond the residential blocks. All were teenage boys and girls, between the ages of 12 and 15. Most had been reported missing from surrounding towns weeks or even months earlier, but their disappearances had never been linked. They were assumed to be runaways or lost kids. That changed when all 5 bodies were found in one place, hidden beneath layers of brush and tarp, partially buried. There were markings on the bodies, odd carvings and symbols. Some locals whispered about cults. Others believed it was a serial killer passing through. Loreen heard the news on the morning radio as she returned from her night shift. She didn't think much of it at first. It felt distant, like a story from another world. But later that day, she found something strange while putting away laundry in Thane's room. Under his mattress was a newspaper clipping of one of the victims, folded tightly, creased at the edges. She almost dismissed it, Thane liked true crime shows, but something made her pause. Why was it hidden? She questioned Thane when he got home from his bike ride. He said he had found the clipping on the street and thought it was interesting. She didn't like how emotionless he was as he said it. That night, sleep didn't come easily. She thought about the woods, the buried kids, the missing cat, and the quiet boy in the next room. She told herself it was all just coincidence. But even as she closed her eyes, her body tensed with a feeling she couldn't name yet. Something was wrong in her house. Something had been wrong for a long time. Loreen couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest. The clipping found in Thane's room had unsettled her more than she admitted, even to herself. She tried to act normal the next day, going about her usual chores, washing dishes, folding towels, feeding the dog, but her mind kept circling back to the names of the murdered kids in the woods. She sat at the kitchen table and looked up their names online. One of them, Camille Eston, had gone missing 3 months ago. She was only 13. Loreen's hands trembled as she opened more articles. In each story, the dates of disappearance were vague but oddly familiar. Then something clicked. She remembered the sketchbook Thane used to carry around before he started hiding it away. It had dark drawings in it, trees, figures, masks. Once, she'd even seen a picture of a child tied to a post, but she brushed it off as a twisted imagination. Now she wasn't so sure. That afternoon, while Thane was still at the library, Loreen went up to the attic. It had become Thane's private space ever since she let him convert it into his art studio. She rarely went up there, respecting his privacy, but now something inside her overpowered that instinct. Dust clung to the old floorboards, and the light bulb flickered as she pulled the string. She glanced around but didn't see anything at first. Then she noticed one of the wooden planks near the wall looked slightly raised. She bent down, pried it open, and found a black sketchbook inside. Wrapped in plastic dot, she took it downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it slowly, as if expecting something to jump out. The pages were worse than she remembered. Each one held a drawing more horrifying than the last. Children blindfolded, rope-bound wrists, outlines of graves. And at the bottom of every sketch was a symbol. A strange symbol, like a letter combined with a number, always drawn in black ink. On the back of the drawings were dates written in red. As she looked at them, she began cross-referencing with the victims she'd just researched online. Every date matched. The exact day the kids went missing. She flipped faster, her breath shallow. There were at least 6 kids drawn in detail. The last few pages showed something new. One child wasn't marked with red ink, but instead circled in black. The date written next to the drawing was only 2 days ago. Loreen's eyes widened as she recognized the face. It was Ela March, a girl from the neighborhood, just 5 houses down. She had vanished recently while walking home from a friend's house. Police were still looking. The details of the sketch were chilling. Ela was drawn with tears down her cheeks, lying beneath twisted tree branches. Loreen's stomach turned. She rushed to the shed, not caring if anyone saw her. Inside, she scanned the shelves and corner piles. Everything looked normal until she spotted a black duffel bag pushed behind a stack of garden tools. She unzipped it, her fingers shaking. Inside were gloves, rolls of duct tape, and a large hunting knife with dried blood at the edge. A pair of sneakers too small for an adult were at the bottom, smeared with mud and something darker. Loreen staggered back, dropping the bag, and ran to the house. She wanted to scream, to call someone, but she didn't know what to say. Her mind raced. What if she was wrong? What if this was all some kind of game, a sick fantasy Thane had created, but never acted on? But then she remembered the news reports, the sketchbook, the matching dates. Ela March. This wasn't imagination. It was real. Her hands moved on their own, opening Thane's laptop on the dining table. It was password protected, as always. She stared at the login screen, heart pounding. Then she remembered a word she'd seen scribbled in the back of the sketchbook. Kalian, a strange name she had never heard before. She typed it in. The screen unlocked. And what she saw next would change her life forever. Loreen stared at the screen, her hands cold against the keyboard. Thane's desktop was neat folders arranged in perfect alignment, a blank gray background, and no visible shortcuts. But one folder stood out at the bottom right corner. It was labeled Gameplan. She hesitated only a moment before double-clicking. The folder opened with a soft click, revealing subfolders with names that made her skin crawl. Trial 1, Trial 2, all the way to Trial 6. Each matched the number of victims found in the woods. She opened the first folder, and the horror began to unfold. Inside were photos, audio files, and scanned pages of Thane's handwritten notes. Each folder detailed a victim name, age, habits, daily routines. Thane had documented everything. what time they left school, which streets they used, where they were likely to be alone. Each profile was obsessively detailed, as if compiled by a private investigator. But worse were the images, some taken from a distance, some shockingly close. One child was captured climbing a jungle gym at the local park, another walking into their front yard. Thane had followed them for weeks, watching, studying. The notes were even more disturbing. They referred to each victim by a code name: dishonor, greed, cowardice, deception, pride, and the newest, disobedience. Beside each name was a summary of why they were chosen. Loreen felt her stomach twist as she realized her son believed he was punishing these children, that they deserved what happened to them. He wrote about cleansing and ritual selection. Every page was laced with a chilling belief in his own righteousness, as though he was fulfilling some sacred mission. She opened a folder labeled Audio Logs. Her own voice trembled as she clicked on the first file. It was grainy, recorded at night. The sound of rustling leaves and heavy breathing filled the speakers. A girl's voice cried softly in the background. Then came Thane's voice, cold, detached, methodical. He spoke as if he was narrating a documentary, describing the subject's resistance, the time of day, the weather, and even his own emotions, which were consistently marked as neutral. Loreen stopped the recording halfway through, unable to listen further. Then she found something labeled Final Ritual. It was a video file, about 2 minutes long. She debated whether to watch it, but the curiosity, no, the terror drove her to press play. The screen went black, then flickered into the glow of night vision. A masked figure, short and thin, dragged a bound girl across the forest floor. The girl's eyes were wide, her mouth gagged. Loreen recognized her instantly. Isla March. The child was alive in the footage. The figure positioned her beneath a wooden frame made of branches and bones. Arranged in a twisted triangle dot, the figure reached for something. Loreen saw the flash of a curved blade, and then the screen turned to static. The video had cut off before anything final happened, but the message was clear. Isla was still alive when this was filmed, and she might still be alive now. Loreen dropped the laptop. Her legs moved before she could think, racing back to the attic. She tore through the floorboards where she'd found the sketchbook, clawing at the wood until her fingers bled. Then she heard something, a low, muffled sound, weak but unmistakable. It was coming from beneath the insulation behind the far wall. She grabbed a hammer from the hallway closet, slammed it into the drywall again and again until a hole opened. The stench hit her, first earth, mold, and something foul. Then she saw fabric. She pulled it aside and revealed a body. Not a corpse. A girl. Isla was tied up, weak and trembling, her eyes barely able to focus. Loreen pulled her out, tore the gag from her mouth, and held her close. The girl couldn't speak. She was too dehydrated, too traumatized. Loreen didn't wait. She called 911. Her voice broke as she explained everything, the attic, the folder, the drawings. Within 30 minutes, police arrived. They took Isla into medical care. Loreen stood by the doorway as officers examined the attic, the shed, the laptop. Downstairs, they found Thane sitting on the couch in the living room. The television was on, playing an old horror film. He didn't resist when they handcuffed him. He didn't even speak. He just looked at his mother one last time with a small, hollow smile. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds as the officers walked Thane out of the house in handcuffs. He didn't struggle. He didn't shout or cry. His face was calm, composed, almost vacant. Loreen watched from the porch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her legs felt like they would give out at any moment. She had discovered her son was a monster, but even then, she couldn't comprehend the scale of what he had done. As the police car drove off, the flashing lights disappearing down the street, she stood frozen in place, unable to move. Inside, The house, detectives and forensic teams worked their way through every room. The attic was now a sealed crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape. They collected the sketchbook, the laptop, the duffel bag, and dozens of other items Loreen had never noticed before, trophies perhaps. Small belongings that could have once belonged to the victims: a keychain, a charm bracelet, a scratched-up MP3 player. Each item was cataloged and photographed. The house now transformed from a home into evidence. Loreen sat at the kitchen table, silent. A female officer offered her water, but she barely acknowledged her. Her thoughts were spiraling. How long had this been going on? What had she missed? What had she ignored? The questions were endless, and every answer pointed to her failure. Her mind returned to the sketchbook, to the drawings of the children, the symbols, the structure in the woods. Thane had built something ritualistic, something designed. This hadn't been random violence. It was planned, executed with disturbing precision. At the police station, Thane spoke freely. No lawyer, no hesitation. He told investigators he had been chosen by a voice, what he referred to as the Whisper God. He claimed the voice began speaking to him after his suspension in 7th grade, guiding him, teaching him about corruption and purity. Thane believed the children he killed had flawed virtues. He referred to his actions as purifications, and said each victim represented one of 7 broken traits that needed to be removed to cleanse the world. 6 were already completed. The 7th, he revealed calmly, was meant to be his final act. That final target was Loreen. Investigators were stunned. Thane had written out a detailed plan for how he would abduct and kill his own mother. It was scheduled to happen within days. He had even built a space beneath the floorboards in the attic large enough to hold her. Loreen's name was listed in a separate file under the code name Betrayal. Thane believed she had failed to protect him from the world, failed to see the truth of what he was becoming. In his mind, her death would complete the cycle. As this information was revealed, Loreen sat in a police interview room, her body cold, her face pale. An officer explained everything to her slowly, carefully, but it felt like she was underwater, every word muffled. She couldn't process the fact that her son had not only murdered others, but had also planned to murder her. The pain was too deep, too sharp. Back in Red Hollow, the town was in shock. News trucks flooded the quiet streets. Neighbors who once waved politely now looked at Loreen's house with horror and pity. Everyone had a theory. How could something like this happen? Right under their noses? Teachers remembered Thane as quiet, smart, polite. No one saw it coming. But the truth was hidden in the silence, in the things not said, in the gaps people didn't look into. And Loreen had lived in the deepest part of that silence. Later, she sat in Ela March's hospital room. The girl was recovering slowly, speaking only in whispers, clinging to her parents. Loreen stood at the door for a long time before she could bring herself to enter. She didn't speak. She just knelt beside the bed and placed a single hand on the girl's blanket. Tears welled up in her eyes for the first time. Not just for Ela, not just for the other victims, but for the son she thought she knew, and the darkness she now realized had been growing right beside her, unnoticed and unstoppable. The trial of Thane Myles became one of the most watched criminal cases in the nation's history. The media labeled him the Red Hollow Reaper, a name that spread quickly across social platforms and news headlines. Experts, psychologists, and criminal analysts all offered different theories. Some blamed violent media, others focused on his isolation, his intelligence, or his obsession with control. But no one had answers that made sense to Loreen. None of their words explained how a 14-year-old boy, her boy, had become capable of such cruelty. Thane was charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, multiple counts of kidnapping, and the planned homicide of his own mother. The prosecution sought to try him as an adult due to the horrifying nature of the crimes, and the clear evidence of premeditation. The courtroom was packed with journalists and victims' families. Some days, Loreen sat in the back, wearing dark clothes and sunglasses to shield herself from the stares. On others, she couldn't bear to attend at all. Thane showed no remorse throughout the trial. He sat quietly, answering questions with cold precision. He described each of his victims as if they were items in a project, steps in a plan he believed was larger than himself. When asked about the final stage, betrayal, his voice remained steady as he explained how he had prepared the attic for Loreen, how he studied her routines, and how he believed her death would complete the cleansing ritual. He didn't cry, not even when the jury was shown images of the sketchbook, the attic hideaway, and the footage he had recorded in the woods. Forensic psychologists evaluated him extensively. They confirmed he was sane. His belief in a whisper. God was not a psychotic delusion, but part of a self-created system of control. They described him as methodical, emotionally detached, and highly manipulative. One expert stated Thane displayed behavior consistent with severe antisocial personality traits, despite his young age. He understood right from wrong, he simply didn't care. Loreen gave a statement at the sentencing. She stood behind the podium, her hands trembling as she faced the courtroom. She didn't look at her son. Instead, she addressed the families of the children he had taken. She apologized not to defend herself, not to seek forgiveness, but to acknowledge the pain caused by the child she brought into the world. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. Not then. She had cried enough in silence, behind closed doors, away from the public eye. She ended her statement by saying she no longer recognized the boy she raised, and that the person who committed these acts was not the son she thought she had. The judge sentenced Loreen Myles to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Because of his age, the sentence drew criticism and support in equal measure, but the victims' families wanted finality. They wanted justice, and now they had it. After the trial, Loreen disappeared from the public. She left Red Hollow, quit her job at the hospital, and changed her name. No one knew where she went, and no one asked. Her house remained empty, eventually sold to a distant buyer who never moved in. The attic was sealed by the police. The shed was torn down. Nature slowly reclaimed the backyard, where dark things had once grown unseen. Thane was moved to a high-security juvenile facility that would later transition into an adult prison once he came of age. Guards reported that he remained quiet, polite, and eerily calm. He never spoke of his crimes again. He spent most of his time reading, drawing, and writing still, sketching in the same style as before. The prison psychologist reported that his behavior had not changed. He simply no longer had an audience. In the years that followed, the town of Red Hollow tried to move on, but some wounds never closed. The woods were fenced off. Parents became more watchful. Children were no longer allowed to walk home alone. The murders became a cautionary tale whispered from porch to porch, taught in classrooms as a reminder that darkness doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it grows silently across the hallway,